Every man carries a circle of hell around his head like a halo. Every man has to go through hell to reach his paradise.
Christoph, let me ask you, why do you think that Truman has never come close to discovering the true nature of his world until now?
We accept the reality of the world with which we're presented. It's as simple as that.
You do not want that, like you do not want a boil on the end of your tiny dick, Lance.
So this is my friend Jamie Marsh, who I first met back in 2007 at the Actor Studio.
I have a family history of spontaneous human combustion. I go up like a Roman candle. Oh, get that oxygen away from me!
Now this guy knew I was a Scientologist, and he had the nerve to take it upon himself and drop off this book, Combating Cult Mind Control by Steve Hassan, on my doorstep back in January 2008. And he completely changed my entire fucking life. So we're going to be taking up that book specifically here in this video, or at least parts of it, and introduce it. We'll probably do another video or two on this as we carry forward. But this will really help us to lay a really good, solid foundation going forward as we get deeper into this, about what the hell is mind control? What is a cult? What makes a cult a cult? Because that word is thrown around so much nowadays, it's almost lost its meaning, but there is an actual way to determine that. And what is brainwashing? So what we're going to do is jump into this subject, and then at the end of this video, we'll discuss some of the things that are going to be coming up that will sort of tag on to this sequence that we're working on. We're jumping a little bit ahead in the story part. We're going to cover how my friend dropping that book off and how it snapped me out of it, and what that whole experience was like when we get to the end of this season, because that's the season 2 finale, before I wake up and do the deprogramming process and the escape process, which is season 3. So we're not going to cover in detail all of that moment. We'll talk about it, but the reason I'm bringing it up here is because it's a perfect time to talk about what these things are. So when we carry forward, we won't lose people. Because like I said before, mind control and these techniques have been around forever. And they've been particularly perfected in the last 50, 60, 70 years. We're going to go back to Scientology's roots, as mentioned before. And when we start talking about some of the deeper levels of this technology, because it is a technology, it is a science. It's a science of the mind, of how to control perceptions and therefore how to control behavior. We're going to get into all that in this video. So with that in mind, let's take a look at what the fuck the B.I.T.E model actually is, and then we'll start talking more about it as we carry on. So here's the B.I.T.E model, and under behavior control, you'll notice such tactics are used as sleep deprivation, rewards and punishments, and obedience to authority. To control information, deception is used. Often extensive use of propaganda is used, and we have confession and spying. Under thought control, we have a totalist ideology being practiced. We have loading the language, hypnosis, and thought-stopping techniques. To control emotions, such things as phobia indoctrination, love bombing, and manipulation of guilt are used on people. So we mentioned that B.I.T.E model very briefly in episode 6.5 called the Tower of Babel. And I mentioned we'd be taking it up in the future. Well, here we are. And the way this works is, let me give you a little bit of a backstory on Steve Hassan and this book. He himself was a Moonie, and he was in that cult, which everybody knows is a cult, right? So when I opened up that book and he said that he was a Moonie, he never mentioned Scientology until the end of the book. If he had mentioned that Scientology was a cult, I would have slammed the book shut. It was a miracle, by the way, that I even read it. It's not as easy, unfortunately, as just dropping the book off at somebody's house that you think is in a cult and they'll just read it and snap out of it. We'll discuss that more when we get up to that point. But the point is when I didn't shut down right away because he didn't mention Scientology. And he just said, look, here's the areas that any cult to varying degrees controls, which makes it a cult. They control behavior, information, thought, and emotion. And he had all these different points under each of those sections. It was right there at the beginning of the book. And he wasn't talking about Scientology. He was talking about the moon cult and cults in general. And I'll be goddamned if every one of those fucking points wasn't describing Scientology. They do spy on people. Oh my God, the auditing sessions, those were confession sessions, which were going to be used against me. Oh, and things were just clicking off by, reading this model. And I'll throw up a slide of this thing here so that you can see what I was actually looking at. You can pause this video if you want to see the detail. But the basic idea is that I had just never seen anybody describe a cult. There's all these different ideas about, it's just some weird belief system. It's a high control group. But then what are the elements to this thing? How the fuck do you determine it? And when he laid this thing out, I was just like, as they say in Scientology, having cognition after cognition after cognition. Cognition means realization in Scientology. So like I said, we'll discuss that whole point of the story when we get up there, because it was an unbelievable experience. But anyways, the point of this is that I had never come across information on a cult. I read this fucking thing and I was out of Scientology in 30 fucking minutes. I knew that mankind's greatest friend, who I trusted all these years, was a fucking liar simply by seeing this trick that he pulled off that I was totally unaware of. So before we jump into this further, let's get a definition. Scientology super adamant about defining everything. So let's define what the fuck is mind control. How does this B.I.T.E model fit into what we're going to be talking about? And what are some of the tools? And then we'll pick it up from where we left off right here. Now, many people think of mind control as some ambiguous, mystical process that can't be defined in concrete terms. But in reality, mind control simply refers to a specific set of methods and techniques, such as hypnotism or thought-stopping techniques, that influence how a person thinks, feels, and acts. And this is based on research and theory by Robert J. Lifton, Margaret Singer, Edgar Sheen, Louis Jolyon West, and many others, who studied brainwashing in Maoist China, as well as the cognitive dissonance theory by Leon Festinger. Now, Steve Hassan developed the B.I.T.E model to describe the specific methods that cults use to recruit and maintain control over people. That's what it's all about. So B.I.T.E stands for behavior, information, thought, and emotional control. So here's some of the mind control tools that are used by a cult. There's many more, and we're going to go into a lot more detail when we cover the curriculum, but here's some of them. We have confusion techniques, sleep deprivation, subliminal programming is used, hypnotism is used, both overt and covert. We have fear and phobia programming, black and white thinking, us versus them thinking, good versus evil thinking. You can see the polarities. Group conformity, and we have isolation from family and friends, and most importantly, isolation from information that could possibly set them free. So we're taking up the I part of the B.I.T.E model first because it's the most important. This is the control of information. If you can control the information, all the rest, including behavior, will follow. The greatest weapon is not a gun or a bomb, it's the control of information. Because to control the information is to manipulate all the minds that consume said information. This is how information control is achieved within a cult. Deliberately withhold and distort information, forbid you from speaking with ex-members and critics, discourage access to non-cult sources of information, divide information into insider versus outsider doctrine, generate and use propaganda extensively, use information gained in confession sessions against you, gaslight to make you doubt your own memory, require you to report thoughts, feelings, and activities to superiors, and encourage you to spy and report on others' misconduct. So we're going to take up the information control in this video, and then we'll cover the other 3 points, the behavior control, the thought control, and the emotional control, and how these all work together in the second video, as well as the creation of the false identity, because you basically have 2 different identities that are clashing against each other, the real self and the false self. We'll cover all that in the next video that we do on the B.I.T.E model, but I'm going to go through this information control here and show you some of the reactions that I was having when I was reading this fucking thing. Because as we do this, as we go through this, see if you can't take a look at your own life and your own groups and the society at large, and see if you can't see some of these techniques being used. This was the big revelation that I had coming out of Scientology. Because I wasn't integrated in the real world like everyone else, and I didn't really know what that was about, I couldn't help but see, after about 1.5 to 2 years out of Scientology and studying how this worked, how I got trapped in this bubble, this fake belief system, I couldn't help but notice this around me and these same tools being used. So there's one other thing. I've done a lot of research using ex-cult members as a basis to understand that, Scientology isn't the only one that uses this. The fucking Jehovah's Witnesses are using it. The Mormons are using it. Advertising uses this. My God, the television is using all this shit. See if there's one thing that I've noticed, like going to people's YouTube channels, ex-cult members, people that are into government conspiracies, all this, there's one model that a lot of the people use to determine cults. And it's this thing, the B.I.T.E model. No matter what we may agree or disagree on, this is a pretty well-established model to determine mind control. So here we have information control, which you just saw the slide for. And I'm going to read here off of my computer just some of these items and just tell you what was going off through my head when I was looking at this shit. So one of them says minimize or discourage access to non-cult sources of information, including internet, TV, radio, books, articles, magazines, media. Absolutely. Scientology wouldn't let you look at dick. You couldn't watch Leah Remini's show Scientology in the Aftermath, for example, or you were considered a suppressive person. They discourage access to non-cult sources of information, including critical information. You could never look at anybody saying anything negative about Scientology. Former members. You couldn't talk to former members. Hell no, they're all evil. Keep members busy so they don't have time to think and investigate. This is what I was saying in the first few videos when we were talking about this shit. You always have to be working. They keep you so fucking busy, you never have time to think. That's all part of keeping you in this false identity after it's created. Control information through cell phone with texting, calls, and internet tracking. Where else have we seen us being tracked, I ask you? So another one, compartmentalize information into outsider versus insider doctrines. Ensure that information is not freely accessible. Absolutely, that was the case in Scientology. Control information at different levels and missions within the group. Again, we're back to the compartmentalization about how everything's kept compartmentalized. And we have a slide on that coming up too. That's really important, by the way. And that's what keeps people from seeing the bigger picture. So they don't really know what the fuck it is. Allow only leadership to decide who needs to know what and when. David Miscavige was the king, L. Ron Hubbard was in his time, and everybody else was fucking subordinate to that. Encourage spying on other members. Now, when I was reading this is when my heart was really starting to drop, because you're told when you're doing the auditing sessions where you tell all that information is not going to be used against you. You have priest penitent confidentiality. I believe that, and we believe that, so there's no way they were ever going to use this against us. But then I'm reading this, and it says, encourage spying on other members, impose a buddy system to monitor and control the member. My God, we were always twinned up. They have a thing called twinning in Scientology. And you were responsible, by the way, for going out and getting your twin. If you never showed up to chorus and shit, you were made to basically pull your buddy back in if he ever tried to leave. Report deviant thoughts, feelings, and actions to leadership. Yes, we had a thing called KRs, or knowledge reports. When Jamie, my friend, dropped that book off, my first reaction, what I was going to go do, is go down to Celebrity Center that day and write a knowledge report on him. Here's a suppressive person telling me I'm in a cult, dropping a book on mind control on my doorstep. I knew and was programmed to immediately go down to the church and report this motherfucker. So ensure the individual behavior is monitored by the group. Again, absolutely. Here's another one. Unethical use of confession. Now my heart's really fucking dropping because I'm thinking, oh shit, did I tell him anything in the auditing session I shouldn't have? Because I had no idea this was going to be used against me, but I was getting the picture when I was starting to read this shit. Because remember, he's not talking about Scientology, and he's describing Scientology to me. You have to use unethical use of confession. Information about sins is used to disrupt and or dissolve identity boundaries. Holy shit. You withhold forgiveness or absolution. Them making you guilty was what the whole damn thing was about. And then this one really freaked me out. Manipulation of memory, possible false memories. What the fuck? You mean these past lives that I was contacting in Scientology, they might have been false memories and not actual past lives or real past lives? What the fuck is going on here? Like I said, when we get up to the point where we talk about this specifically, I'll explain how this guy was able to get me to read this book, why I didn't report him to Celebrity Center, and more about what the hell was going on here, because this was the most powerful moment and day in my life. So there you go. That's like I said, we're only going to be taking up the information control here because otherwise this video will be 5 hours long. We'll break this down in pieces. The next part is, and this is very, very important, is I have a question for you, young man or young lady. How would you know if you were under mind control? How would you know that? How would you be able to detect it? Because a lot of people have wondered about this. Well, let's dispense first and foremost with this myth of invulnerability. I'm too smart. That shit could never happen to me. What a bunch of fucking idiots. Hang on there, Tiger. It's not as obvious as you might think. People who are under undue influence, they don't see their situation clearly. They truly believe it's their own free choice that they're making, and they're indoctrinated to not think independently. They're isolated from other points of view and critical information that would allow them to reality test their situation. So they're literally living in their own little cult bubble, and they really can't see their situation objectively. Now, what made this whole thing impossible for me to see while I was in Scientology is, at its core and the fundamental, is the control of information. At the very top of the pyramid is the inner core that knows what this whole thing is about. And they compartmentalize information, as we talked about, so that people at the bottom and anywhere in between the pyramid, they don't have any idea what they're a part of. For example, you get into Scientology because you think you're there to get benefit. It's going to help you in some way. You wouldn't obviously go to something that's harmful. However, if you knew what it's really about, which they only know about at the top, you'd never step foot in the door because it's one of the most harmful things you could possibly do to your mind and to your whole being. So obviously you have to lie. And the way that they do that is what this next slide is about. And briefly, it's all about the control of information. And then the thoughts, the emotional response, and the behavior follow. So if you can control the information, you got everything else to follow, all the way down to how a person acts. Here's an example. In Scientology, once you get captured, they're so unbelievably active on making sure that you don't seek outside sources of information. That's what a cult has to do. And in order for that to work, by the way, they have to hit you from every angle. It's so unnatural. And your true self is always fighting against the creation of this false self, which you know deep down isn't right. But the pressure and being hit from every angle keeps you there. And crucial to that is you have to prevent people from talking to ex-members. Scientology doesn't want you to talk to any ex-members because they might snap you out of it. They certainly don't want you coming across this information in Steve Hassan's book or anything that's going to show you you're in a cult. They're very hardcore about black PRing, as they call it in Scientology, people like Steve Hassan or anybody that's a cult deprogrammer, obviously, because that's the information that will show you what you're involved in that will literally set you free. So they have unbelievable amounts of ways to control the information, because without that, and this next slide that we're going to show you, none of this would be possible, and people wouldn't be able to be manipulated, lied to, and be tormented without even their knowledge that that's what's happening. So here's another important point that we discussed in previous videos and we're going to be expanding upon in the future. Destructive cults are authoritarian with a pyramid structure. So at the bottom there, you have the fringe members who have no idea what's going on. And then you have the rank and file members there at the bottom of the pyramid. These are Scientologists that are going up the bridge and taking their courses and getting their auditing, and they think they're going up the bridge to total freedom. And then you have the more core devotees as you ascend the pyramid. And Scientologically and celebrity speaking, these would be people like John Travolta, Tom Cruise, Kirstie Alley, Elizabeth Moss, and definitely Jenna Elfman. And then you get to the top there on the sub-leaders, and that's where they have the intelligence divisions, which is like their own little secret CIA operation called OSA. And that's where you get into the dirty tricks and the intelligence operations. And we're going to be covering the whole top of this pyramid as well as more about the pyramid itself as we carry along. But the important thing to understand here is that everything's kept compartmentalized. And the higher up you go in this pyramid, the more you learn, but the more you also become controlled and demented. So we have one more tool to cover in this particular video before we wrap up. And this also was featured in that book that was dropped off on my doorstep. And you'll see what it is, but it's a scale of how to determine whether you're under undue influence by a psychopath on the far end, or whether you're under healthy influence or no influence on the positive side. And I said at the very beginning of this series that my goal was to connect dots, because that's what happened to me. It was a series of even though I intellectually understood I was being calm within 30 minutes of reading that book, it took another decade of study and going within and a lot of hard work to actually clearly see what the fuck I was dealing with. It's still an ongoing process. The healing process will go on till I die. But there was a point where I have a pretty clear idea of what the fuck's going on and what happened to me. So the reason I bring that up is because we had a guest on named H.G. Tudor, a narcissistic psychopath who did, I thought, a very good job of breaking the subject down of narcissists and sociopaths. By the way, thank you very much for the positive feedback and emails and stuff. I got a ton of response from that, and it seemed to activate a lot of people's interest. We're going to have him back on again at the beginning of January, by the way. And we'll have other people on too, because the point, like I said, is to cover all these different topics that I was forced to learn, and any cult member is, if they do their due diligence, which, you know, in order to be able to understand and heal themselves. So you'll notice in this particular scale, some of the things HG was talking about and how it fits in with those characteristics that are on the unhealthy side of the continuum. So let's take a look at this model. And keep in mind that as we go forward here, we bring on other guests, we cover more subjects. The whole idea is they're basically one subject at the end. And you'll see, as I said before, how everything connects to everything else. So this is a model to help people determine whether they're under undue influence or not. And it's all about whether that influence is constructive and healthy, like you see on the left-hand side there, or whether that influence is destructive and unhealthy. It's a sliding scale. So we have 3 different boxes here which describe what this influence continuum is like, whether it's healthy or unhealthy, for individuals, for leadership, and for organizations or relationships. So for the individual, are you encouraged to be your authentic self? Is love unconditional? Are such things as compassion shown? Are you encouraged to be guided by your own conscience? Is creativity and humor encouraged? And is free will and critical thinking respected? On the destructive or unhealthy side for individuals, you're going to be encouraged to develop a false or occult identity, a pseudo-identity. Love will be conditional. You'll be encouraged to hate, and that comes with following strictly a doctrine. Fear and guilt will be used to control and manipulate you, and dependency and obedience are created. Now, what's this influence continuum like for leadership? So on the healthy side, that leader will be psychologically healthy. They will know their own limits. They will empower individuals. They'll be trustworthy and accountable. They'll be responsible. On the other side, we have leadership demonstrating narcissistic or psychopathic traits. They're elitist and grandiose. They're power hungry. They're going to use secrets and deception to control people. And they, of course, claim absolute authority. I know best. Now, for organizations and relationships that you're in, on a healthy continuum, you're going to have egalitarianism. You're going to have checks and balances. There'll be informed consent. You'll know what you're getting into. Individuality and diversity will be respected and encouraged. The means create the end. Growth will be encouraged, and you're always free to leave. Now, on the other side, the unhealthy or destructive organization or relationship, that will include such things as elitism. There'll be an authoritarian structure, a pyramid structure. Deception and manipulation will be used to control people. It will clone people and make everybody the same. The ends always justify the means. It preserves its own power, and there's never a legitimate reason to leave. So destructive mind control can be determined when the overall effect of these 4 different components promotes dependency and obedience to some leader or to some cause. and it's not necessary for every single item on the list to be present. And like any technique, it's not inherently good or evil either. If mind control techniques are used to empower an individual to have more choice and authority for their life remains within themselves, then the effects can be beneficial. For example, benevolent mind control can be used to help people quit smoking, not me, without affecting any other behavior. We'll talk more about that too as we go on. Mind control becomes destructive when it undermines a person's ability to think and act independently. Okay, my friends, that about wraps it up for this video, but we'll definitely be doing at least one more video in the future on the B.I.T.E model and this book in general, because it's a really good tool, in my opinion, to use as a foundation going forward. So a little bit of house cleaning before we end off here. We're just going to do episodes 1, 2, 3, 4 going forward. That's going to be the numbering system, because it got too confusing, I think, by adding the 0.5 videos, and it looks kind of corny on the titles and shit. But the structure is still the same. We're going to cover one video on the storyline, and then the other video will be a technical video. They're not necessarily going to go in that order. We might do 2 storylines and then throw in a technical video, not least because these technical videos take a lot more work than telling the story. But the format's the same. The numbering is just not going to be so cheesy and confusing. And also, here's where we're at. So we got to cover at least one more video on the B.I.T.E model. And then we've done the TR, or training routines, to start your indoctrination, so we can take you up this bridge, like I said we're going to do. But we need to jump over to the auditing next, so we can get that going too. On the bridge, which I'll show you when we get into this, there's the auditing side, where you hold the soup cans and get hypnotized and have false memories implanted into you. And then there's the training side, which we started with the training routines, where you go up that side. Each side, they say in Scientology, is worth 50% of your gains, actually losses, if they were telling the truth. So we're going to jump into the auditing when we get into the next technical video. We're going to hit another video on this B.I.T.E model, and then we're also going to be bringing on guests. And also, this thing keeps expanding, it seems like, which is a good thing. Due to the feedback that you guys have been giving, which, by the way, is super, super helpful. We're also going to do a Q&A, because a couple of the commenters brought that up as a great idea. It really helps me. I know what needs to be said. I have the basic storyline, but it just helps on the feedback as to what you guys want to hear. Somebody suggested do a breakdown of the movie The Master. Tell us more about NXIVM. Hey, we wanted to hear more about your father. Any and all feedback, even if it's quote-unquote negative, hey, I don't like this, go fuck yourself. As long as it's relatively civil, I absolutely would love to hear it, because I'm talking into a camera, into thin air, and it really helps and makes me feel connected to know what the fuck you guys want to hear and what you're thinking. So with that in mind, as they say at the end of every Scientology auditing session, end of session. And I'll see you on the next one. Take care.